What's going on, Time Clan? It is your boy King Time X here, back with another video after what's basically been over a week now. Probably coming up to like 8-9 days by the time I'm recording this. But all you guys really need to know is I've been busy with life. And Neptune helped with this script, basically helping with the planning and all that. So yeah, the intro already played. Now we just need to get into the video. Now, when we last left off, the Straw Hats would have been making their way up Reverse Mountain. Nami, of course, she would have been shocked out to the whole group. To her, this really just made no sense. The fact that they were going up a stream of water that was coming from a mountain, that didn't really make much sense to Nami. This wasn't how physics worked at all. But Luffy, he didn't show any concern on his face. He had already heard several stories from Shanks over the years about the Grand Line, so he would have been well aware of how strange it could be. The Straw Hats, they would have found themselves facing off against the giant whale though as soon as they got past Reverse Mountain. When they first saw the whale though, they thought it was just a giant rock. They would end up finding out that they were wrong though, and in the process they would end up getting consumed by the whale. Well, most of the Straw Hats anyway. Luffy, he was simply flown up away from the whale's reach. He would have landed on the whale's head, slamming his fist down onto it. It would have been a giant fist made out of smoke, but the density was high for this one, making sure that it would have full impact. All the force behind it would be felt. Luffy would continue to wrestle with Laboon until he basically forced them into subservience. From there, Luffy would find out the story about Laboon from Crocus. When it came on to Crocus, he would have helped the Straw Hats get out of Laboon's stomach alongside some people who were trying to kill his whale companion. These two people weren't too much of a concern to Crocus, since he had managed to already tie them up. Their main concern right now was Luffy and stopping him from basically hurting the whale anymore. Crocus would try to get through to Luffy once they managed to reach outside, but the black-haired boy, he would have just laughed hard, hearing what Crocus was trying to say. To Crocus' surprise, though, Luffy would turn his arms into thick smoke. He would have covered Laboon's stomach with this smoke, and he would attempt to lift the whale up. While doing this though, Luffy would actually begin to sweat. He was really struggling to lift this whale up. He wasn't honestly expecting for this whale to be so heavy. Honestly, it was just poor judgment on his part. But Luffy, to everyone's surprise, he would have actually managed to get the whale up a couple of feet before simply collapsing in exhaustion not too long after. Although Luffy failed, Crocus would have still been impressed. He would have actually applauded the boys' efforts though, and he would have gifted them a log pose. Crocus would explain the whole issue with the Grand Line not working like how the rest of the world worked. He was honestly surprised that the Straw Hats didn't know about this already, and that they didn't have a log post of their own already. Honestly, it was a pretty good thing that they managed to reach here first, or else, well, let's just say, The Straw Hats would have been in big trouble once they reached the Grand Line. They couldn't simply use a compass to navigate their way through the Grand Line after all. They usually spiraled out of control early on. Nami would have graciously taken a log pose away from Crocus. She would have actually appreciated a piece of advice before glaring at Luffy, expecting for him to have known about this. The group would question what to do with the two bandits though that tried to kill the whale. The two bandits were feared for their lives though, and they would mention how they came from an island close to here. They were struggling with food rations, so they figured that they could end up using the whale in order to feed their starving villagers for the next month or two. Considering just the pure size of the whale, if they were to be careful with food rations enough, they could probably make it up to 3 or 4 months. Luffy would sigh, deciding to accept their reasoning, and he would actually request to find out where their island was. Nami would end up guiding the group to Whiskey Peak, where they would all be welcomed by the villagers. It was a confusing experience for the Straw Hats though. At no point in history, or at least as much as they knew already, had they ever heard about an island excited to see pirates. That was completely contradictory to what pirates were like. They were immediately suspicious because of that. Luffy would look at Zoro, and the two would simply nod in agreement. No words had to be said. They knew exactly what they had to do now. They needed to investigate. There was something fishy about this situation that they were in. Luffy and Zoro, they would participate in some of the events, sure, but they would have only done it to make it seem as if they hadn't caught on to the people yet, what sort of schemes that they had. While everyone was asleep though, because of the fact that they had decided to party so hard that night, Zoro and Luffy, they would have been wide awake. They would have still been vigilant. They would be sitting on the rooftop hearing the conversations made by the villagers. From the conversation that the people were having, the two would manage to understand that these weren't regular villagers at all, but in fact, there was actually a whole village full of bandits that planned to rob the Straw Hats for all of their rations, whether it be berries, gold, food, all of that. But hearing this, Luffy would just scratch his head. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to the boys at all, considering how they had to use up quite a bit of their own rations in the first place, just to get them to lower their guards. And even then, it still failed in the end because of the fact that Zoro and Luffy were still vigilant, and they were the strongest members of the crew as well. It would have been better to simply attack as soon as the Straw Hats reached the island, but that was besides the point right now. Luffy and Zoro, they would jump down facing the bandits. There were 100 of these guys. They'd split that number in half though, 50 for Luffy and 50 for Zoro. Zoro, he would slice down most of the people in his corner, and at one point even show his superior strength against a muscular woman twice the size of Zoro. He would clutch her face, squeezing it hard enough for her to release her grip on him. Luffy would throw smoke punches at most of his opponents. Some of the punches were feints though. He would have just used them to induce coughing from them because of the way that smoke worked. Essentially, when it came on to Luffy's smoke, he could use it in multiple ways. It could easily be used to just create like a gassy environment that would basically force his opponents to lower their guards due to them coughing, or he could just use brute force. this time around, Luffy decided to use both. He would have messed up their senses using the feints, and this would have left them wide open for more devastating attacks from Luffy, knocking quite a few of them out. Others, Luffy would break the legs. Luffy would simply break the legs of, leaving them curled up in a ball from his fighting. Basically, his punches were just that devastating. Not only that, but he would also end up kneeing some in the stomach, which would also force them to curl up into a ball. Luffy, while finishing up his set, would end up getting hit by an explosion. He would be sent flying, and he would hit a wall. There, Luffy would leave an indent on the wall, but despite the pain he felt from that surprise attack, he would actually push himself out to the wall in order to see who was the cause for this attack. He would look around only to see a black man with a trench coat and sunglasses in an open space. They were pressing their finger to their left nostril. A blonde woman would be standing next to him, congratulating him on the direct hit he managed to give to Luffy. Luffy would have put 2 and 2 together at that moment and realized that this was the guy who hit him, the same guy who essentially used that messed up surprise attack on Luffy, but it also seemed as if he used his boogers to attack. Once Luffy put that part into the equation, he was disgusted. He wouldn't even bother to give this guy a fair fight at this point. Rather, Luffy would just turn into smoke, with Mr. 5 attempting to use his spit this time. While inhaling though, Luffy would go up inside of Mr. 5's nostrils before beginning to reform. Luffy would have caused for Mr. 5's head to explode in the process. It wasn't an explosion that this man could actually come back from. Mr. 5's partner, on the other hand, she would be horrified. Luffy would simply knock her out as well though. Luffy would wake up the rest of his crew, informing them of the situation. They would quickly gather their belongings, and in the case of Nami, she would gather the people's belongings. She was still a thief at the end of the day, and this was just too big of an opportunity for her. While boarding their ship though, the Straw Hats, they would end up encountering another person. She would have caught the Straw Hats off guard though with her unique abilities. She was different from the other bandits. She was more mature and confident in her abilities. She managed to completely control the situation from start to end with the Straw Hats, who were apprehensive towards her at first. She would simply give the Straw Hats advice though. She simply suggested that they use an eternal log pose in order to be led to Drum Island, since the current island they were going to be led to was, well, Little Garden. She had her doubts about the group actually surviving that place, considering, well, just how much of a ruckus that they had made over here in Whiskey Peak. But Luffy, he wouldn't really listen to Robin. All of her words, they would simply fall on deaf ears. Luffy wanted to test his luck against Little Garden. It wouldn't really be an adventure if he avoided all of the dangerous parts after all. And he needed to become stronger if he ever hoped to become king of the pirates. The woman, she would just sigh and leave the scene after hearing Luffy's response. Luffy and the crew, they would make their way to Little Garden, where they would encounter dinosaurs. That was the very first thing they encountered, at least. While there, they decide to explore the place until their log post reset, finding another island. Zoro Zoro and Sanji, they would find themselves competing against each other and trying to hunt down the bigger dinosaur. Nami, she would have looked around in order to get an understanding for the agriculture of the island. Usopp would be too terrified to leave the ship though. Luffy would end up finding out why the island was called Little Garden in the first place. He would end up encountering one of two giants there, and he would hear about their seemingly eternal clash against one of their friends apparently. They were equally matched in all forms of combat. Every stat they were pretty much equal in. Luffy would have respected the determination that they had in order to continue battling despite how many years that had passed ever since their initial fight. They didn't even remember why they were fighting in the first place. It was just that this was a sacred duel that they had to complete. Usopp would eventually be taken off the ship as well when the dinosaur tried to attack. The second giant, Dory, he would have grabbed the dinosaur before introducing himself to Usopp. Usopp would be wary of the giant at first, but he would decide to trust him for the while. It was better to be around a strong individual rather than be alone on the ship after all. Both Luffy and Usopp, they would get an understanding for the mentality of the giants, but they would fail to realize when Brogy's strength ended up getting tampered with. They would only notice it later on though when he fought Dory once again. There was something up with Brogy during their fight though. It seemed as if he was more sluggish. Brogy would reveal that there was something up with his strength during their match though. This would have been after Dory had already cut his friend. It felt as if there were explosives added into his strength. Hearing this, Luffy would have his eyes widened. He would understand right then and there that there is someone else on this island. This was terrible. This was a pretty terrible situation for them. Somebody had decided to mess with their sacred duel. Now that I thought about it, he had yet to hear much from the rest of his crewmates. Luffy would have found this to be odd. He would have at least heard Sanji and Zoro bickering by now. Luffy would tell Brogy to take it easy for right now. Dory, he would try to mend his friend's wounds as well during this time, due to that battle being interfered with. Whoever the person was that dared to tamper with such a sacred duel, well, Dory would make sure that they were paid by his hands. Luffy would grab Usopp before zipping through the island sky. The duo would eventually find a strange contraption in the middle of the island. Usopp, who had pointed out though, first. Once the two descended, they would end up finding their crewmates. They were actually trapped within said contraption. The culprit behind it would reveal himself to be as an honestly not too intimidating man. He was scrawny looking, and his hair was shaped to resemble the number 3. Luffy would raise an eyebrow at the getup the guy had. They would reveal themselves to be Mr. 3, and that they would actually be taking out the straw hats to receive their bounties, and hopefully a promotion from the boss. Luffy would just nod slowly before he would just ask Usopp to shoot this guy in the kneecaps. Simply put, Usopp would comply, and Galdino, he would scream bloody murder from the pain that he had just experienced. He wasn't expecting for these guys to actually do something like this. Miss Golden Week, she would try to use her paint in order to mind control at least one of the two boys, but Luffy, he would create a dense smoke screen and was effectively a shield against her paint. And Luffy would grab Miss Golden Week afterwards. He would turn his arms into smoke, immobilizing her in the process. He would use his other arm to destroy the contraption holding his comrades, and Luffy would hand Galdino over to the giants to deal with. In exchange, the two giants, showing their appreciation, would give the crew a new log pose. It would explain the issue. Basically, what ended up happening is that after the giants gave the Straw Hats a new log pose, it would explain the whole issue with this island. It was the fact that when it came onto this island specifically, it would take a while for the log pose to reset. So, taking this log pose, this eternal log pose at least, it would have been able to lead them to like the next island. From there, they could probably do a lot more in that next island. They could probably get another log post or something. They could probably do far more. They didn't want to be trapped here after all. The giants still had to complete their duty of, well, fighting each other until one of them gave out, and this time correctly. But Luffy would just thank the giants before leaving with the rest of his crew. They would end up encountering a giant fish on their way to the next island though. Dory and Brogy, they would cover for the Straw Hats though by slaying the creature. Luffy, he would have stared in awe at the amount of strength that these two had, especially after all of these years. It had been a whole century, for crying out loud. He would just look at himself. He would have had quite a bit of a perspective on himself and the rest of the world. At this point, Luffy would have realized that he really was just a small koi fish in a large sea. Luffy, well, he didn't plan on remaining just a koi fish for long though. Eventually, he would grow to become a shark, a great white shark, or even a megalodon. No, not even that. He would become a sea king, one of the largest at that. While on their journey though, the crew, they would notice that Nami was acting a bit strange. Sanji would have caught Nami when she collapsed at one point. He would mention how she was burning up and that she had an extreme fever. Luffy would have felt her forehead as well, and he would be immediately concerned. He didn't want to lose Nami after all. They were placing their luck on the next island to have a doctor that could treat the girl. While on their way to Drum Island, the Straw Hats would end up encountering Wapol, but Luffy wouldn't have had any patience here. He would have slammed Wapol off of his ship. He didn't care who this guy was. He was wasting the Straw Hats' time, since he wasn't giving them any useful information here. Time that they did not have. Once the crew made it to Drum Island, the residents there, they would be apprehensive towards the Straw Hats due to their prior experience with a pirate crew. But Luffy would plead with the people though. He would request that they meet with the doctor that they had, or at least if they had a doctor. One of their crewmates was incredibly sick after all. He didn't know how severe the sickness was. For all he knew, there was a chance that she could die. He was just incredibly concerned for Nami, so concerned that he would even be willing to bow his head in order to show his earnesty. Seeing this, the de facto leader of the people would actually step up and introduce himself to the Straw Hats. Dalton was his name, and he would ask Luffy to raise his head and explain the situation. After Luffy explained the situation, Dalton would explain their own as well. Essentially what ended up happening was that the kingdom was recently attacked by a pirate crew. The king, oh so gracious king, he decided to abandon them at the worst times, basically when they were the most vulnerable. So it was natural that the people would be wary of pirates, especially so soon after the last one that was. Though they did have a doctor, she lived up at the top of the mountain. But Luffy, he wouldn't have had any issues with this. He just had to be careful with how he held Nami as he flew up there. Dalton would be surprised to see Luffy turn his lower body into smoke, and he would end up flying with Nami in his arms. Once Luffy made it up to the top of the mountain, he would end up finding out that Dr. Korea, well, she wasn't there at the time. Luffy would at first think that Dalton lied to him, thinking that this was just some game. But no, Luffy, he would calm down. He would decide to think the process through. He would evaluate the situation, and he realized that there was a chance that it could just be that, well, she was just down the mountain right now. She just decided to go down the mountain for a little bit, and that she was probably coming back up soon. Luffy, he would wait an hour before Dr. Korea arrived back on the mountain with what looked like a reindeer wearing a hat. She would look after Nami, relieving Luffy. While waiting for Nami's recovery, Luffy would end up befriending Chopper, the reindeer. He would eventually manage to convince the younger boy to actually join his crew. Wapol, well, he would try to come back and take back the kingdom that he had abandoned, but Luffy, he wouldn't have had any of that. Instead, he would have restrained the man-child and the subservient soldiers before flinging them away into the sky. Chopper would have been impressed by how easily Luffy was able to handle these guys. He wasn't even sure if these guys were alive now, but that wasn't really a concern to them. What their next concern though was their next location, that they would be going to the next island. They would end up going to Jaya next. When it came on to Nico Robin, she would have actually been allied with Crocodile until the man found the poneglyph, telling them about the information behind where Pluton was. She wouldn't have told him the actual coordinates of the warship though. Instead, she would simply lie, jumbling up the coordinates. Certain numbers would be swamped around while others wouldn't even be mentioned by Robin. The king would have even been surprised as well, hearing Robin basically lie about all of the coordinates, but he would try to play it off as if he didn't know either. As if these were the real coordinates. And of course, well, this would have convinced Crocodile. As far as Crocodile was concerned, this seemed to be legit. Crocodile's men, they went to search for the ancient weapon, while Robin, she would slip away from Alabasta. Crocodile didn't really care though once he noticed that she had left, considering how she had fulfilled her purpose as far as he was concerned. Robin, she would end up encountering the Straw Hats at Jaya, where Zoro and Luffy, they would have taught Bellamy's crew a lesson in messing with their friends. You see, what ended up happening was that the crew met with Mont Blanc Cricket at one point. They would have heard his family's history on one of his ancestors apparently finding a city of gold, but they were told their king, and well, they ended up getting into a bit of a situation. This situation revolving around the fact that when they actually set sail to find the place, well, no one was able to actually find out what he was talking about. To them, it just seemed as if he was lying. He was turned into a laughingstock, but the man would earnestly plead that he was innocent and that there really was an island. There was just a chance that it may have sunk to the bottom of the sea. Apparently though. He would be sentenced to death by the king for basically sending him on a scavenger hunt. Not even really a scavenger hunt, a goose chase, really. Luffy would have felt bad for the man, but he would explain that he didn't really care about this guy since, well, they were barely related at this point, and he had already led a successful life as a pirate already. So now he was just interested in finding the city for himself. He had a feeling that it didn't sink at all though. Rather, it was sent into the sky, considering what happened to his house at one point. Luffy wouldn't doubt the man's words, but he would figure that for now his crew needed to get stronger and make a name for themselves down below in the blues before even thinking about going into the sky, where there were even more great unknowns up there. Cricket he would understand, but when it came on the Bellamy's crew, people that tried to bully Luffy for his dream of finding a One Piece, they would have been keeping close eye on the Straw Hats. They would find out about Cricket's hideout and they would raid the place, stealing all the treasure that he had managed to gain over the years. Luffy would have found out about this and he would have knocked out Bellamy in one punch, surprising his crew. When it came on to Zoro, he would have knocked out the rest of Bellamy's crew from there. Robin would have been impressed by the Straw Hat's strength, and she would have figured that they could be the next people that she could probably ally herself with. At least for now anyways. Luffy and Zoro, they would collect the treasure, and they would return it to Mont Blanc. They no longer had any purpose on this island, so the crew, they would leave only to find Nico Robin on their ship once again. She would do her best to calm down the Straw Hats though, and explain that she just wanted him to join their crew in exchange for protection against the Marines at least. She could read poneglyphs, which made the world government view her as a threat for what sort of information she may be able to find. And the Straw Hats, well, they could give her protection, so she could supply them with information while the Straw Hats gave the woman protection, and honestly sounded like a fair trade to her. And Luffy, he would have heard Nico Robin's resume essentially, and he would decide to accept her onto his crew. She sounded useful enough in this book, and if she managed to survive for this long, she had to be strong in her own right. Not only that, but she had a dream as well. That dream being to find out about the history of the world. This would have made her a valid candidate for his crew. Everybody had to have a dream. Their next stop from there would be Water 7. And that is how I'm basically going to end part 2, people. It is your boy, King Tiny Next, signing out. You guys already know the deal about the description. My link to my Discord server and links to you know it's great. I'm tired. And basically a link to Neptune's channel and the Wattpad story, their fan fiction, will also be linked in the description. And yeah, I'm too tired to say the rest. I think I'm sick right now. So yeah, this is probably why I don't sound like I have the most energy right now. So yeah, peace.